professionals. All right. We are not live on X just yet because you need a premium account for that. So there you go. Okay, so we are currently streaming on YouTube for the moment, and this is officially the kickoff of Saul Animation 2025. This is our second year, Scuba. It's already come around. That was a quick 12 months, huh?
I don't believe it.
I know. And we've kind of streamlined it this year. We've decided to just do 3 days as opposed to a full week, and cut all the fat off and just condense it down into the good stuff. So if you're watching this right now, the exhibition has officially gone live on Mallow, so you can go and check it out. It's on the front page, and check out all the lovely animations, and make sure to like your favorite, because the one animation with the most likes at the end of the festival will win the Mallow Audience Prize Award. How much is that, Scuba?
I think it's $800.
I think it's nothing to be laughed at this time of the year as well. That's it's pretty good for somebody's Christmas stocking.
It's a few tanks of gas.
Yeah. That's like one packet of eggs in America, right?
Yeah, maybe a half dozen.
Yeah. But again, like we said, we wanted to cut down on the fat, and we wanted to just bring some quality this year. And to start it off, we wanted to talk to somebody who's actually worked in the industry and has excelled in it and has done some really cool stuff and can impart actual knowledge for our listeners and the people taking part and people who are interested in animation. And I've been a big fan of Adam's work ever since I was introduced to him when he spoke with Roach at Breakpoint in Amsterdam back in 2023. And we're joined by Adam from Studio NX, and he's going to talk today about a project and an animation called Niko and the Sword of Light, which is really cool. I actually dug into it after I first seen his interview in Amsterdam, and it started off as a kind of an experimental iPad based animated comic, and then it went on to become an Emmy Award winning animation on Amazon Prime. So that's quite the journey, and that's it's pretty impressive. I think what makes this an interesting production to talk about is just the pipeline and the iterations it's gone through, and especially back when you first did it, I wouldn't have thought an iPad would have been considered a legitimate tool at the time as well. So and you utilize Kickstarter as well, and you've gone through like this complete around the block story with this. So I would love for you, Adam, to just introduce yourself, what Studio NX do, and what you plan on breaking down with regards to your production pipeline today, what you're going to share with us.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me, and thanks for the kind intro. I don't know if I'm quite as wise and knowledgeable as you make out, but I feel like I'm learning, new every day. So it's very kind of you to say. But yeah, basically, I wanted to break down a kind of a flagship project with everyone today, because after years of pitching shows and getting rejected by the execs, we got to the point where we were like, let's just make something, let's just make something that we can get out there to an audience. And at that time, the iPad had just come out, and we were looking at it thinking, it has this interactive screen. What can we do with that? It's kind of unique. And my friend Bobby said, well, when you guys used to read comics when you were a kid, did you not used to imagine that the comic would come alive in your hands, and you were sort of imagining the movie play out in your head? We're like, yeah, I guess you do. That's how you read comics, right? You kind of project onto it the voices and the scene playing out. So we said, well, let's do that. Let's actually have the comic. You press the panel, and it actually plays out like a full animated movie with voice acting and music and sound effects and stuff. So like, that's awesome. Like that lit a fire under our asses, and we started working on that. And having gone from producing animation for Marvel, Disney, Nickelodeon, CBBC, like all those big companies, it was great. And we felt like we wanted to just do something for ourselves. So this became a pure passion project. It was like there was no client or exec to kind of answer to. It was just us working in our spare time, evenings and weekends. But it got to the point then when we realized it was going to take us years and years and years to finish this thing, because it was a lot of work. It went from this small animated comic into a 55-page fully animated graphic novel. And we needed some help. So as Trev said, we actually thought, well, let's go to Kickstarter, because again, Kickstarter is straight to your audience, right? Like you can pitch something, and if people like it, they'll back it, and that also builds an audience and gives validation to your idea. So we said, let's put a Kickstarter campaign together. We'll obviously need a trailer to do that and a little pitch video. So actually, let me share my screen, if I may, and I can share it with you how that looks. Let's go here. Hopefully this all works. No, is it working?
I'm not seeing anything on my end yet.
Uh-oh.
Trev's got the full hosting permissions on his end. He might be able to.
Yeah, it's not giving me a share option now. It's great. It's grayed out. Let me try it once more. We did test this just before the call and it worked, and now it's suddenly not working. Yeah, all my share options are grayed out now. I obviously don't have permission to share. I'm not important enough.
Trev, you're muted at the moment if you're talking.
I said, this is me trying to hog all the controls on the stage. We did test this as well. This is
okay, it's working now. Yeah, I just tried it again. Let's see. It was obviously just
look at that.
Look at that. Okay, we're good. We're back. All right, let's go.
Back from Trev.
All right, let me just get myself organized here. A few different windows open. All right, so let me know if you guys can see this all right. So this was actually our Kickstarter page here. So Niko and the Sword of Light, fully animated comic book. As I said, we spent about 3 months putting together a trailer, and the trailer basically captured everything about the comic that we wanted to do. It was like high stakes adventure fantasy set in a world of like prehistoric beasts, almost like He-Man, Thundercats inspired from our childhood, where you follow the adventures of this lone warrior who's like the last of his people in this battle against the darkness. So yeah, let me share the trailer with you and you get a feel for it here.
Many moons ago, the dark grew restless and decided it would rule. Time was running out. But there was hope.
Hi, my name is Bobby Chu, and I'm from Imaginism Studios. And what you just saw was a trailer for our fully animated comic book. Now, this would be for iPad, tablets, and our team consists of some really great guys. There's Kay Asadera, also from Imaginism Studios. There's Jim Bryson and Adam Jeffcoat from Studio NX. And I've known Jim and Adam from college for many, many years now. And since then, we both went our separate ways. And Jim and Adam, they started to do storytelling and animation for companies like Nickelodeon, EA Games, Blue Zoo. And Kay and I, we started to do concept art and character design for feature films like Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, Men in Black 3, And 10 years later, we met up again. And we thought it'd be great to work together. So we started to spit around a bunch of different ideas, and one just kept coming to the top. We all wanted to see a fully animated comic book.
All right, so there you go. There's a little snippet of the Kickstarter video there. So we basically put that out and tried to, throw it out to all of our followers. We managed to raise, here you can see exactly what we raised, £33,000. So it's about 40,000 US dollars. And that basically paid for us to get help, freelancers like animators and colorists and stuff to actually help us finish this thing. And all in all, it took us 2 years to complete the project from start to finish. And we finally got it done. And we packaged it all up and put it out on the iOS App Store. And luckily, Apple featured it. And it ended up going to #1 on the worldwide bookstore at the time, and shot up in the first week or so to 500,000 downloads. And we were flipping, thinking, oh my God, this is amazing. We're going to be millionaires by the morning. And we got our sales reports, and it wasn't quite what we expected, because the difference between people downloading free apps and actually paying for stuff, we had a little paywall in there where you had to unlock the rest of the content. The difference between people actually paying for stuff was pretty minute. So it didn't make quite as much money as we hoped. But what it did do, as Trevor mentioned, is get the attention of Amazon Studios. And at the time, they saw Niko and said, oh, that would be great for our new pilot program on Amazon Prime. So it ended up finding its way onto TV, which I'll explain a bit more later. But for now, I wanted to go through with you guys basically how this was made, a whole animation process, starting from the top. Can you guys still hear me all right? Just give me a shout if anything drops out. Or
Oh, you are perfect, Adam.
Awesome. Okay, sounds good. So first stage, obviously, like I mentioned, was conceptualizing this idea, right? We sat around with the team there, Bobby and Kay, who are concept artists. Me and Jim are animators and storytellers. And so we would literally meet up like they do in Pixar, sit around a big table with a bunch of teas and vape, and just be like, all right, what are we doing here? How are we making this? And this sketch is actually from that time. We just had big sheets of paper, and we would sketch out as we talked, what we wanted to do. And basically, we wanted to tell a story about light versus dark. It was at the time, there was a lot of stuff coming out about small heroes against massive odds. Obviously Star Wars being a classic example, but it was a theme of movies at the time. So it felt like a good theme for us, I guess, similar to Game of Thrones as well. You back the underdog when they're going against these large forces of evil. So that felt like a good basis to our story. And we knew it wanted to be a comic format, and we wanted to set it in fantasy times, because our artist Jim Bryson had this amazing ability to draw fantastical creatures and beasts. So that kind of formed our base. So as I say, everything starts with these sketches, and then we would go in and start figuring out, okay, well, where do we want to take the audience on a journey? For us, all the best adventure stories would take place in all these different fantastical locations. Raiders of the Lost Ark, for example, is such a great movie because it takes the audience to Cairo, to Alaska, to the pyramids in Egypt, to South America, to the temples. And so you're going on this adventure through the story. So we started just laying out some cool ideas for where we could take Niko. If he was this tiny warrior in this prehistoric land, how cool would it be if he went to a world that was underwater? And we would just start collecting reference of different things. Then we thought, oh, it'd be great if he got washed up on this beach, maybe trapped in quicksand, and then he comes across these giant crabs or crocodiles. Then he goes to the swamplands, and there's all this crazy large toad with multiple eyes that swallows him. So a little bit like Pinocchio, who gets swallowed by the whale. And then he ends up on this in this huge hill, and the hill is actually made of a giant, based on this sculpture on the bottom right here that we found in this park in the UK. And then he would go up to the storm clouds, which is almost like the home of where the darkness resided in this volcano. And there'd be this dragon that would burst out of the storm clouds and chase him. And then eventually you'd end up in this mountain, and maybe there would be a wise god in there that would guide Niko, this alien dolphin god that would guide him. And then eventually that would take him to the very top of the volcano, which was the abyss that led down to the darkness. So very much like the hero's journey, Niko is going through his own fighting his own inner demons and eventually facing darkness itself, which was like the darkness in him, very much like Voldemort to Harry Potter, that kind of thing. So that's how we would work out sort of the structure of where the story would go. And then off the back of that, our concept artist Jim would create these amazing pencil concepts based on those locations. So the swamplands, this was his like village that had been destroyed by the darkness. This was him launching over towards the cursed volcano. You can see it emanating these like dark clouds, almost like a radar there. This was the hills I mentioned with the giant that's part of the hill, which I'll show you later. And then this underwater kind of cavern scene where he meets the Shrimp King and gets taken to their kingdom. So you start to get a feel for this adventure. We're not leaning too heavily on story at this point. We're kind of leaning more on where we want to take the audience on this journey. So I'm just going to also show you a couple of tests. So because, as I said, the iPad had this interactive screen, we felt like we wanted to take viewers on this journey through these cool lands. Like, so as you move through, you'd get all these creatures that would come out of the trees and the swamps and the branches and everything. So this just gives you an idea of some of the ideas we had for that interactivity. Perhaps you could like press them and they would react, like they would bulge or swim or slither away. And we also wanted to take advantage of parallaxing because the iPad, obviously, you could have layers. We thought it'd be really cool to split the comic up and make it seem deep. So the background was actually further away from you as you're watching it, which is obviously something you can't do with traditional comics. So it was just another test there. So that was the development phase. And then after that, we go into character design. And this is where we're really trying to figure out who the main character is, who is Niko. And both Jim and Kay did these initial sketches just to start to explore him. And you can see how at the top right, he started off as this very innocent kid, something like you might see on Cartoon Network. But then Kay's drawings at the bottom here felt a little bit darker, a little bit more haunted, you know, like they had more of a soul. And we felt like that was the direction we wanted to go in. Until we eventually landed on this drawing here. And that for us just nailed this like unique warrior. He's got this mohawk. He has this pattern carved into his hair. He maybe looks like he's from Spartan times or, you know, Roman times. But he's got this determination, yet he's innocent and he's scarred. And so the story was that he's lost all of his people to this, the darkness to ravage his village. And he's the last survivor and he's holding his people's magical sword of light. And he wants to use it to avenge the darkness. So all of that somehow gets communicated in this drawing, you know, just through the eyes and the determination that Kay captured here. So that became our base for the final character. And on the right here was just some storyboards of how to introduce Niko to the audience, but these were kind of scrapped in favor of going a little bit more mature. So Jim then took that design and created an animation ready design. Because as you guys know, with animation, you have to keep the details simple. You can't have tons of details and lines and shapes as well, because all these shapes have to be rotated in 3D space. So Jim will produce these model sheet drawings here, and then some sketches to show how he looks from different angles. And then facial expressions. So you can see here, like all the different expressions that Niko can produce. And we obviously had to tap into our own 11-year-old selves to kind of remember the kind of faces we pull when we were that age as well. And then the other thing, as I mentioned, is Jim's kind of trademark was that he had a huge social media following based on his ability to just draw these twisted beasts that somehow he could almost merge different creatures together to create something unique. And so we thought that's a really cool thing. If in this land that Niko exists in, I think we called it the Kingdom of Lumin, there would be all these like crazy prehistoric type beasts around. And so it lent itself perfectly to Jim's ability to design these crazy creatures. And one of the ways we knew a creature was possessed is if they had multiple eyes, almost like a demon spider. And the idea is that the creature had been possessed by darkness and turned into this kind of monstrous beast like this. And using Niko's magical sword, if he could strike a kind of a deadly blow, the sword would shoot light at it and it would blast away all the darkness, and it would reveal the possessed creature underneath that was maybe just like an innocent warthog or something. So this is almost like his demonic form that sits over the top. So there's another sketch of the Monstrosaurus there. This is the Slimotoxicus, which was the demon toad I mentioned in the swamplands. and this is the Dracomegadons. This was like the main kind of bad guy, the ultimate demon that Niko would have to face. You can see the scale of him here. This is one thing that was important to us. We wanted to create this crazy sense of scale in this comic as well. So all these concepts obviously really help to guide both the style and the vibes that we want to get from this comic here. So then we move on to color scripts. I'll show you here. So this is actually part of what I work on as partly the story and also partly the color. So based on the way the storyboards were progressing, I would take those and then I would start working out simple color keys for how the action would progress. And the most important thing with color is you're picking colors that convey an emotion. So I'm sure you guys have probably seen the art of Pixar, the art of Disney books that you can get. And whenever you see color keys, you'll notice that those colors have been chosen because they want to convey a certain emotion in the scene. So if it's very intense, it'll often be reds and oranges and yellows. If it's very relaxing, it will tend to be greens and like yellows. Or you can also create intensity with dark and light as well. So like here we've got this kind of intense storm with sort of blues and bright white lightning versus the shadows of the Rocky Mountain here. So we go through and we try to work out sort of a color palette that will convey the vibes here. So the swamplands are this kind of slightly sickly yellow. And then the hill giant was during the nighttime because we felt like that his silhouette would really pop then. Then when he goes into the swamplands, it's this kind of cool purple color. And then into the ice caverns, more of a blue crystally tone. So these were working pretty well, but when we reviewed them, it felt like we were making a show for Cartoon Network again, like almost like a young kid show. And again, that wasn't quite the vibe. We actually wanted to go a little bit older and more mature with this. So Kay said, let me take a pass at making them more filmic. So she's a concept painter, as mentioned, that she had done work for in Hollywood movies. So she then took them and just completely took it to the next level. Like they still capture the base colors I mentioned, but there's just so much more depth and maturity to these shots. The kind of thing you can imagine being taken and turned into like a feature film. It really captures the vibe, like the ice cavern in particular. It's just so magical. And so when you get a great color artist like this producing concepts, it inspires the whole team. It's like, oh my god, she's doing work like this, everyone else needs to step up and and make the animation good enough to match the quality of these backgrounds. So it's an amazing thing when you work with real talent, hardworking talent that in a team, and it kind of inspires everyone to do the best they can. Like I absolutely love this color keys for the swamp here, where Niko falls into this prehistoric river and all these giant fish like surround him and warn him like about the dangers beneath. It's just crazy. So then after the color script, we then work on storyboards, which is again my favorite part of the process. So based on the script and those early designs, we'll start to develop the storyboards. The biggest difference being we're not storyboarding for a movie, we're storyboarding for a comic panel. So we're laying out the panels exactly like you would when you're designing a comic, but then with the idea that later on they're animated. So you can see the story here on the left is would just be an intro card, just explaining how the boy had landed in a massive tangle of vines and knotted creepers as hundreds of pairs of eyes watched him curiously from the shadows. Trudging through the thick swamp with sword at the ready, he ventured deep into the ancient jungle. And that would be narrated by like a proper voice actor as Niko ventures into the swamp. And you can see how we're sort of progressing the story here. You get a wide shot of him as he's walking in, and then he sees something the bubbling and lit up in the distance, and he approaches this area that's bubbling, but there's a voice that's whispering to him saying, "Come closer, boy, come near." And then as he approaches this, the swamp bubbles up, and this crazy huge toad just rises up out of the swamp and starts speaking to him. And he says, "Come closer, come near, tell me that which brings you here." Because Niko's a badass and he doesn't take no crap, he just pulls his sword out and says, "You toad, tell me where I can find the darkness." And the toad chuckles and says, "Assist you, yes I can indeed, but first, my boy, you must help me feed." And the idea is that there's all these flies, big juicy flies flying around the toad's head, and with the iPad you had to press the flies and the toad's tongue would shoot out and like eat them. And then when you had successfully fed the toad, he would then give you the rest of the riddle, but it was actually a trick, and he hypnotizes Niko and then eats him, and then Niko has to figure out how to get out of his giant belly. So let me show you here the next stage of that, which is once we have the storyboards done, and bearing in mind these storyboards have gone through like 10 iterations at this point, the point I showed you, they go from really, really rough to sort of like a little bit more refined. So this, after about 10 iterations to really get the timing and the staging and everything right, we would then go to animated storyboard panels, which looks like this. So you can see there Niko's coming across this area of bubbles, and when he gets closer, this expands. So this is just purely working out the posing, and you'll notice the voice is really muffled. It's because we did a scratch track for that ourselves, and then once we get the professional voice actor in, we replace that track with his voice here.
Nonsense, Toad. Tell me how to get out of this sticky swamp or be destroyed.
Oh, is this you? Yes, I can indeed. But first, my boy, you must help me see.
So that panel bottom right there is what I mentioned, where you click the flies and you have to eat, and he has to eat them. So that gives you an idea for how the storyboard plays out. Let me jump into some actual animation here. So animation, once we got the storyboards down, it's all working, and you know, we've showed it to the team, everyone's like happy with it, then only then will we go to animation, because as you know, animation is something you do not want to be messing around with and changing. You like once you want it to be locked down. And that's the reason why we spend so long on our storyboards and our animatics, is because we want it to be locked down, so that once we start animating it, we're not like, oh shit, you know, we should have changed the timing on there, or we should have changed the staging here. You really want to feel like you are set at that point, because especially with the style we do, like 2D hand drawn, it's so time consuming and costly to change. So I really recommend locking storyboards down. So here's the next stage. So that's just purely just to get the staging right. Then the design is updated with poses.
Show yourself.
Come closer, boy. Come near. Tell me that which brings you here.
So then when you add the actual voice actor, it's the magic starts to happen, because it's like it really starts. So then that inspires the animation.
Who goes there? Show yourself.
Come closer, boy. Come near. Tell me that which brings you here.
So that's obviously the line animation, and then here's the final result.
Who goes there? Show yourself.
Come closer, boy. Come near. Tell me that which brings you here.
So that one panel, which is like, I don't know, 25 seconds, took 3 weeks to animate, and give you guys a little bit more of a snippet into how this is done. So we use Flash MX, which for the more old school of you, that is like one of the first animation programs ever to be made for PC. But it was super solid, and it was simple, and that simplicity forced us to work within those confines, which was good for us. You know, like we didn't want to have tons of options. We just wanted to draw our animation right onto the frame, and we wanted to have a program that wasn't going to crash every 10 minutes. So we drew it all in Flash, and luckily these files still work in Adobe Animate, so I've managed to bring it in here, and you can get a feel on the right here for how many keyframes. So as I scroll through the animation, you can see that the toad coming up, and bearing in mind each one of these is a separate drawing. We did everything on Cintiqs, obviously, like just drawing straight onto the Cintiq, but you get a feel for how much work it is. And obviously this went through a rough animation stage where Jim was figuring out the structure of the toad, how to rotate him as he like rises up in space here. and then starts speaking. So he hits that pose, that upper pose there, and then you'll notice everything else kind of goes still and his mouth moves with a little bit of like chin movement. And then he shifts his perspective back down to look at the boy there. And then again, hold the position, and then the mouth moves. So then if I start to turn on some of these layers, you can see how after we've got the line animation signed off, you can see how we actually color this. So if I start to turn these layers on, you can see the eyes, eye tone, highlight, rim light, teeth, inside of the mouth, and then the toad. And then if I play that back, you can see the line kind of becomes less visible, and you're just seeing more of the color. So this is what I would call, we call this TV feature animation, meaning that it was higher than TV because you'd never have the time in TV to do this level of coloring, like, you know, with these kind of gradients and everything. But you'd also probably go a stage further in feature film than this. So we called it TV feature animation. So we wanted everything to have this like quality look to it that felt like it was like a painted image coming alive. So that's what we tried to achieve with Niko. So let me show you another example here.
Hi, the sign says go away.
So this is the grumpy heel giant.
Hi, the sign says go away.
So as I say, it was really important to us to get like mad sense of scale within this. This is the storyboard version.
Hi, the sign says go away.
So you can see, even though the boards are simple, they really capture like what it is you want to get out of that scene, and then the rest of it is just actually moving it, right? Like that's the key. A good storyboard is you're just essentially adding movement once you've nailed down everything else. So if we go into the flash scene of this file, you can see this one provided a different challenge, because in order for this to look like grass, we actually had to use a painted texture. And then the giant bursts out of the ground, shakes off, and then like hits that pose that I mentioned before, says his line. There's a bit more movement in this one than the toad. So this isn't the very final version, but in the final version, you can see the hair there. We actually took the painted texture and applied it to the hair layer, and then used a mask to mask it all out. So yeah, so much work goes into like the fine details once you've got the animation right. I'll just turn on these color layers here, and you can also see how it was colored. So in Niko, we wanted to make sure we had shading in the animation as well. Like, again, that's something that's often wasn't done that much in the old days because we didn't have tools. Like nowadays, you often in Blender and stuff, you can literally click a button and it will like add shadows, and you just choose the angles and stuff. But even back then, there wasn't really those tools. So we had to hand animate the shadow. So you can see where we chose the shadow line just around his jaw. And then we had to draw that shadow moving with the animation. And it just gives it like a little bit more depth, right? Than if it was all just like a single color. So those were what we would call the money shots, right? Those are like your big one-page, like full-page animations where we put a ton of time into those to really make them stand out. But not the whole of the comic was done like that. Obviously, there wouldn't necessarily be time, and obviously not all panels will require that level of animation. So some of the comic was done more with just splitting up the layers and creating a little bit of movement and parallax to bring the scene to life. So I'll just play you a sequence of this so you can see how this was done.
It is here. I can smell it.
So you can see that whole page. There's not a huge amount of animation here, but it's just enough to keep you involved in the story. But if I go back and break it down, so this here is literally just the painted layers that Kay provided us, just split up in Photoshop, and then obviously animated like with a bit of parallax, so the foreground scenes and the character move a little bit faster than the background to give a sense of depth. There's just a little bit of animation on Niko. It's just a loop of him eating, and then he just turns to face the lightning. And then here again, he's not actually moving. It's just really the jaw and the mouth and the eyes there. Just like a very small amount of animation on Niko. And then even this shot, there's no animation as such apart from an eye turn. But we split the picture of the cave up into these layers, and we just moved it like that. So the foreground slides a little bit faster than the background. It just makes you feel like somehow there's depth to that cave, right? It's more than just a flat painting. And even here, just having the actual titles, the sound effect titles, like slide into frame. You're getting that comic experience, but it's just kind of bringing it to life. Same here, just a relatively simple shot of Niko's hand coming in, reaching for the sword, and then a really quick stamp on the fire, and then smoke effects clears. So you can, create a lot, I think, with little. It's just again the way you choose to approach it here. So let's go to animation to comp. So I've got a couple of examples here of the compositing. So the compositing really is like taking what I just showed you guys, like the flat colored finish, and applying effects, and whether that's fire or smoke. If you just have all that stuff completely flat, you don't quite get the sense of it. So for example, with fire, we were able to take that into the new version of what's now called Adobe Animate, and add like blurs and glows and everything like that to actually bring the fire to life. So this gives you an idea of how that looks. So this is the storyboard stage, then Kay's painting to inspire how it should look. Then we do the staging. Then this is the final animation, and then that's the compositing there. So you can see there's quite a lot of difference, right? This still looks cool here, but everything's completely flat. There's like the fire, all the shapes are flat, so the animations works well. But actually, it's only when you go to the compositing stage and all of that is now glowing, and it just completely brings it to life. It actually feels hot, right? This doesn't feel hot. It's just like maybe looks cool. But I think when you see the glowing and all that, like, the blur and all the colors and everything, that's when you really feel the heat, and all the fire's surrounded by like a red glow as well to get that sort of burning sensation. So the compositing stage again is a very important stage, and it's something that maybe there's often not enough time to do in TV animation, but you get more in feature quality. There's another example here. Storyboard. Then more dynamic staging.
A Draco Megadon! Of course! A Draco Megadon! Of course!
So again, the compositing is what makes the scene feel big, because we blurred out and kind of like made the color of the this dinosaur feel like it's really in the distance, right? And then use like smoke to kind of like mask out the stuff that's further away. You get the feel like he's really big and he's a long way away, but actually when that's all flat, just flat color, you don't get that sensation. So the compositing is super important. Even just adding the under lighting to Niko here makes it feel like the dragon's spines and stuff are glowing. So, and then a bit of smoke over the top as well.
So for someone who maybe doesn't understand what compositing is, could you like give a very brief definition of what it is you're doing at the compositing stage?
Yeah, so I would say you're basically, in a nutshell, compositing is taking a flat image and creating the illusion of depth, right? So if you're working with shadows, or you're working with, you're wanting to add depth into the scene, you're wanting to make fire look hot, you're wanting to make ice look cold. So you're basically, your job is to figure out as many ways as you can using a program like Adobe After Effects to add depth to the scene and lift it from being just a flat illustration and making it seem like it's a movie that you can kind of stick your hand in, right? So a compositor's job is just that. And actually the key with compositing is being guided by the original paintings that I mentioned to you. So if I go back now to the color scripts, we would basically give the compositor these shots, and then their job was to recreate that depth once they have the flat animation, to then recreate the depth that is captured in these paintings. So that again goes back to why concept art is so powerful, because it's capturing exactly what you want. Like this scene here, you see how the hills in the background of this underwater scene are blurred out, just like when you're underwater and things get murky as they're further away. So she's capturing what that looks like, and then the compositor goes, okay, I understand what the depth effect we're trying to get is here. And then they'll add layers over the animation to create that. And then also layers of waviness, layers of wavy kind of mist above the characters to make it look like they're underwater, and then bubbles and things like that, like effects to really top it all off. So yeah, compositing is kind of like the final stage of bringing a scene to life, I would say. So let me show you a final comic scene which has been fully composited, and you get a sense of the finish.
A giant shrimp Mantrolix! And he appears hungry! Best get rid of him right away!
Yes, there's a good example there, you know, like using the compositing to add like depth, like as the beast comes out of the depth, the deep there, you can see he kind of goes from almost just like a murky silhouette and then starts to become clear. But that's all done in compositing. So in the original animation, he was just the same color the whole time, but we add blur, we add a tint over it, and then when you start to match him with the color of the surrounding sea, you get the sense like he's coming out of the darkness. So it's kind of like you're creating illusions, right? And that's the beauty of animation. Like back in the day when animation was first shown in theaters and stuff, people actually thought it was magic, because animators were creating the impression of depth on a screen that was flat. And obviously now with, you know, Photoshop and all these kind of programs, you know, we can take that a step further. But that's really the magic of animation, is you're fooling the audience into thinking this frame is deep, but actually it's just a flat surface. So I'll show you a couple of examples of how it looks on the iPad. So this is a scene where Niko's just defeated the first beast that he has to face, and it's composited within an iPad frame, so you can see how it would actually have looked in the comic.
A ram. Shaken, but she will survive. You are free now, my friend. Uh-oh!
So yeah, that's how we created the comic experience. Basically, each panel, once you'd watched the first one, you'd then press a little button and that would activate the second panel. So you could kind of watch it at your own timing. And then when it was done, you'd swipe the bottom of the screen and the page would turn like a 3D page and swoosh across, and then you'd see the next one. So it created a pretty neat effect. Here's another clip.
Yes, boy! You saved me from a life of greed! How can I ever repay the deed?
Well, friend, all I require is a safe passage out of this swamp.
Of course, young warrior! Strong is your will! The path you seek is through the hills!
There we go. So, so basically, we as I mentioned before, we finished the app. 2 years in total of like blood, sweat, tears, and a lot of coffee, and we released it on the App Store, and it did well. Like we got great reviews. That there was seemed to be people really loved it, but we couldn't really figure out what to do with it, because there was nowhere to really like promote it. Like trying to promote it in the comic space, people were like, well, this is like a cartoon, so it's not a comic. And then trying to promote it in the cartoon space, people were like, well, this is a comic, it's not a cartoon. So we kind of struggled to find its place. But I can show you the App Store trailer here. we got some pretty good reviews, and this is what got the attention of Amazon Studios.
Tell me, how do you plan to defeat the darkness, Niko?
So yeah, so basically Amazon had seen that and said, oh, this is a really cool like product, and we sent them obviously the app to watch through, and we also sent them the data for the downloads on the iPad, and both those helped to get it greenlit into a TV series. And so then basically Niko got the Hollywood treatment, and it went from being this like dark sort of fantasy tale to this slightly more family orientated adventure, and it's different. It's still cool. It was really fun to work on, but it was interesting seeing it change into almost like a kid-friendly cartoon. Me and Jim still did the same sort of thing. We actually animated a little bit on this series. We did storyboards, we helped with the scripts, so we still did a lot of the same processes as on the comic, but this time it was handled by a big production studio in LA, with like Hollywood writers and everything. So yeah, it's a really interesting thing. You can check this out on Amazon Prime if you're into that kind of show, and you can see what you think of the difference between that and the original comic. And the original comic is actually unavailable right now because we took it off the App Store, but we are actually potentially planning on bringing it back with the help of Roach, who you guys may know from X, the Solana comic legend. So yeah, we'll see if we can do that. But yeah, that's pretty much me. So thanks for listening. If you guys want to obviously follow us, then you can follow us on Twitter at Studio NX, or check out our website. But yeah, I don't know if you guys have got any questions or anything you wanted to talk through.
Yeah, that was fantastic. First of all, thank you very much for such a thorough breakdown through the process. I almost forgot I was hosting and was just immersed in watching the entire process. And if anyone in the chat or who's listening has a question, pop it in, and we'll get it on screen so Adam can answer it. I think for me, originally I was thinking I'm really interested in seeing how. Oh, we've lost Adam.
We kicked him out.
We kicked him out. We got what we wanted from him, and we got rid of him. We'll get him back, but Scuba.
We have a strong Solanimation brand to uphold, being bad at technology here.
Yeah.
How's that for a mic drop? I just like went to stop sharing and just dropped out of the call.
Yeah, we got what we needed, so we're like,
yeah,
get out of here.
You guys are just cut me off. It's like the sheep hook comes in and just whips me off the stage.
It's funny. It's for me. I don't know how you feel, Scuba, but I was really interested to see, the pipeline how you created this versus like a traditional animation pipeline. I was like, oh, it's going to be a lot. It's going to be like scaled back a lot, and I was immediately just taken back. This is a full production. Like it's you could easily, you said about people saying it's not quite a comic, it's not quite an animation. I'm instantly thinking you could easily already at that stage just take all of those panels, stitch them together, and it's an animation.
Yeah, it's something we actually would like to do. It's something that I talked about with Roach there was to basically just turn it into a movie with a widescreen kind of format. The only reason I haven't done that yet is because a lot of the panels were so like thin and vertical that by the time you scaled them all the way up to like widescreen, they just look really horrible and pixelated and blurry. So I would have to figure out a way to scale up the original footage and see if I can get it high res. But I would love to do that at some point. It'd probably be about like 15-minute straight movie at that stage.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking about like scaling, is there anything that like didn't really scale from the comic to when you went into the full Amazon animation? What something that you probably didn't expect or did expect, or
Yeah, I mean, it's you have your vision, and you're like, all right, it was really important to us to go against the grain. I personally think dark stories are better. Like stuff that takes you to the edge of being scared, especially when you're a kid, because life's not all rainbows and unicorns, right? Like, and what are we preparing kids for if we only show them princesses like twirling around and singing and happy endings and stuff? I feel like you got to have a bit of darkness in your stories, and those are the ones that I remember like being really drawn to as kids, like the Dark Crystal, or obviously as I mentioned, Star Wars, or anything Jim Henson, basically. Labyrinth. There was a real like haunting kind of dark aspect to those, so we're very inspired by that. So that we naturally assumed Amazon was drawn to as well. But actually, once we started going into that process, you could see how things started getting stripped out. Oh yeah, this is going to be family friendly, so let's remove the possessed beasts. Let's give Niko a sidekick. Got to have a comedy in there. Let's give him a mentor. So then they introduced the princess because they wanted to have female viewers as well. So you saw it going through these stages of like, I don't want to say being Hollywoodized, because that's not necessarily fair. It's more that's what family viewing expected. And we resisted it, like, because I thought my job was to fiercely fight for that vision, until I think Bobby said to me one day, he said, like, how do we know that we're right? Like, we're being told this by guys who have worked in this industry for 20 years. And we were pretty much like new to the industry at that point. He's like, maybe we're not. And I thought, yeah, that's true. Like, I'm fighting for something, but yeah, I don't really know if my way is better. So we kind of, we let go a little bit, and we tried to meet them in the middle. So we fought for where if there was, for example, there was one where they suggested a musical, and where Niko was like singing. It was like, no, there's no friggin' way in anyone's world that Niko is singing a musical. So we drew the line there, but we did like adhere to the sidekick. And once we started to design the sidekick and actually like imagine his character and stuff, we had this like glass-eyed crazy little squirrel dude called Mandok, who was like Yoda, but he was a scammer, right? So it was kind of like it became quite fun. And so he did play off Niko well, because to have 13 episodes where this young boy warrior is walking the land with no one to speak to would have been potentially a little bit dreary. Like Samurai Jack pulled it off, but he's a samurai, so he doesn't say much, whereas Niko's a kid. So actually having a sidekick probably was a better choice. And then the princess was older than Niko and trying to deal with his like immaturity and naivety. So he's obviously running around like trying to defeat the beast, and she's trying to keep him in check and train him. So again, it's quite an interesting relationship started to develop, where she's got responsibility, but actually his innocence is also what made him awesome and what made him able to face fear head on. So it was a real ego check, like in fight for your vision, but don't hold on so tightly, because you don't always know what's best until you try it.
It's kind of like that balancing act of like, okay, these suits, these studio people, like they've done this before, like,
yeah,
how much trust do you put into their vision with that?
Yeah, and I think it's true, right? The other thing that to consider is like how wide your audience is, because when you go to a movie, say with some kids and some teenagers and adults, each one of them gets something different out of it, right? Like the teenagers want to watch the romance, and the little kids just like the visual comedy, and the adults want to be entertained fully by the story. So what they were doing was making sure that it had a wider reach. Like the comedy sidekick would pull in the younger viewers, like Lyra would bring in the female viewers, and then it would hopefully have a wider appeal. So yeah, really interesting. Like there's a part of me that would have liked to have gone full on Samurai Jack style badass, but it was a good learning experience.
Nice.
And I think sorry, Scuba, were you going to go ahead?
I was going to say we got a couple questions in the chat from the audience here.
I do want to ask before we jump to the audience. You obviously showed like the conceptual art and stuff, and how important that is. And what I like is because you develop such an amazing world and such an amazing concept design and such amazing character designs, and that visual identity is so unique. And when it jumps to the animated show, it's largely all there. And I think that something I notice as well when these kind of small teams and small studios jump to a bigger platform, you kind of see the identity in the visual sense just dilute. So was that something that you guys were aware of? Like, we need to protect the visual identity of what Niko and the Sword of Light is, because when you see that jump, it's still all there. And maybe it's a case that Amazon was like, we don't need to touch this, it's just perfect. But you know, when your team grows and you have a bunch of animators, it's it must be harder and harder to keep that consistency.
Yeah, no, and that's actually, you bring up a good challenge that I'd kind of forgotten about. But it was, I think there's two very different levels of creators, right? You get the people who create shows. Like, for example, we worked before with a creator who had created a kids book, and then it got turned into a TV series, and she was just happy working a little bit on the scripts, and whatever we sent her with the animation, she was happy with. And she might have made the occasional note like, oh, I think the emotion's not quite coming across in the scene, but it was a very general note, right? Versus us on the other side of the scale that made notes on every freaking thing. I mean, we probably drove Titmouse Studios crazy because we micromanaged everything, especially at the start. And basically, when we went into like the production for the pilot, the art department started sending us concepts, and obviously they'd watched the animated comic and they were trying to capture that. But it's not. It's more a case that it takes time to land on a visual style. So it wasn't that they weren't able to get it; it's that they weren't getting it straight away. And so we would almost draw over the top of their concepts and suggest, different lighting or how to get more of a Niko style staging or composition. Or Kay, for example, would actually paint color keys for the actual Amazon show and just say, this is the vibes we want. But what you find is after you've done that for a little while, the art department then start to get it, and they start to produce closer and closer and closer until they're just off running. So it's like you have to be really heavy at the beginning with guidance, and then over time you sort of you're able to let go, and the production takes over. And then by the 13th episode, they're just nailing it, and your notes you reduce right down. So again, it's a process of control, but also trust, because there's definitely a balance to be had where I think we were probably pissing these guys off because every note we made means their job harder. So you got to keep the team morale up as well.
Yeah, you don't want to end up in like a John Kay situation with Ren and Stimpy where he's literally just doing everything all over again himself.
Yeah. Well, I heard Miyazaki is crazy. Like, he just screams at people, tells them to get out of his office if they haven't got it right. So I think that would be a step too far for us.
And on that, we do have a question, and they're asking, I want to ask, how important is a character sheet for making animation? I already have my own character, but I haven't made the character sheet yet. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. I like the way you pulled it up there. It's very cool. Yes, I think it's really important, because partly just for yourself, like, you need to know your own character, and you have to see what they look like in different expressions, and some things fit and some things don't. So the character sheet gives you opportunity to explore the personality of your character. It's one thing, this is how they look, but this is how they act. So with Niko, everything was worked out in drawings before we did any animation. Like, he was this really energetic little kid that would like leap around everywhere, but he was quite athletic, so he would almost move like a martial artist. So Jim's drawings show him in like poses that some kids would struggle to get into, right? He's like in almost kung fu stances, like waiting, ready to go, because he's like, I'm enthusiastic and I'm ready. So you're drawing personality when you make a character sheet, and also testing out like the limitations of the character, what expressions fit, what don't, and then, as I mentioned, simplifying them down to make sure that they are not too complex when they're animated.
And I think as well, like, going back to your previous answer, especially when you're going to start to scale your production, if you're lucky to be in that position, that character sheet is fundamental to communicate your character to the animators that come on board, that work for you, that this is the logic and the rules of how this character works. I suppose as well, it's like I think if I don't have a character sheet, I just start to draw the character different when I get to like the seventh or eighth or ninth frame. I'm starting to add different things. I'm like, oh, so yeah, I love me a good character sheet. It's I love exploring animation productions like Hey Arnold or The Simpsons and looking at their design bibles and the character sheets that and all the little notes they give to the animators about like the do's and don'ts as well.
Yes,
It's really fascinating.
yeah, we had that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have another question. We have, hello. I would love to know, how do you know when you're on the right path with an animation project? Oof,
Yeah,
that's,
good question. It's the moment when it starts to feel like it's a living, breathing world that exists on its own. So if you remember back to where I showed you the designs of Niko, like when we were first working on it, it was like we didn't really know what it was. Was it an illustrated book? Was it a comic? Was Niko this kid? Was it for a younger audience like Cartoon Network, or was it for older? But once Kay designed that Niko that just hit all those right beats, it was like, oh my god, this is a real kid. This is someone who exists, and he has history, and we can imagine him. And then the world kind of grew around him, and this prehistoric world, and the beasts all came in. So it's hard to describe, and it's different for every project. But for me, there's just a point where it goes from being an idea to existing in the collective imagination of everyone involved. And if there's one director, their job is to communicate that until everyone gets it, or if it's a group of people, the job is to create that vision together. And so you're all living and breathing in that world, and you're essentially just bringing it out into life from your imagination.
Yeah, I think what you've like masterfully demonstrated, which I think it was something me and Scuba were even talking about the other week, was before you had a story or you had a narrative in place, you were world building, and you were building this universe, and this is what the characters look like. This is the logic behind it all, and you were creating this. You already had almost a feeling of what this was, and before you ever figured out what the story was. And something we were talking about, like young animators who are just diving in to create shorts, particularly for some of the pieces we got submitted, where it's like, I don't think they had this thing figured out when they started it. And it feels like, I don't think not enough people are storyboarding enough or world building, or like we say, the design sheets. And it's the kind of the unsexy work underneath the bonnet of the car, but nobody ever gets to see it, but it's vital for a good finished product.
Honestly, this is the secret sauce. This is one of the most important things I would ever say to young animators, is that when you're watching a film on the screen, you're watching something that's been iterated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. And it's often a case that a story will always improve over time, it naturally kind of gets better, because you make mistakes, you improve, you make mistakes, you improve. And the mistake comes when a script is handed in too early, hasn't gone through enough changes, storyboard is handed in too early, an animatic is handed in too early, animations are handed in too early, everything. And then and eventually you get a final film. And so you can always spot these. You go to the cinema and you watch a film that you're like, why is this script just so on the nose? Like, you can almost predict every line. It's because the script didn't go through that extra stages of iteration where they went for nuance and subtext rather than just saying what you see, right? Same with animation, same with storyboards. Like, I could go back and show you, and that's the reason why I showed you our early work. It looks like crap. Like, it always looks like crap. And at the time you're like, oh my God, this is terrible, but it will just progressively get better. So we put the most amount of work into those early stages because it's the cheapest way to reiterate. Because obviously if you wait until you're doing animation and you're chopping and changing, it's extremely expensive and time consuming. But in the storyboard and the design phase, you can do 20 storyboard sketches to arrive at like almost the perfect shot, and then take that and animate it. And that's what the audience will pick up on, is those layers and layers and layers of depth that you've put into it. So and I completely agree with you. It's something that I see all the time, is that people, and it's down to patience, it's down to lack of awareness. It's just jumping straight into drawing the final picture. And some people are good at that. Some people are like artists that can just pick up a white page and just draw. But for us, we believe the craft is actually in refinement and doing it again and again and again and again and again. And that's what the old Disney masters used to teach. You know, Milt Kahl, he animated the tiger in Jungle Book. Like, he never animated a single thing until he had absolutely nailed these thumbnails, tiny little thumbnails in his sketchbook. And he would sit and sometimes spend 3 days just doing that, and then 1 day animating, because he knew that that's where the magic actually took place. And the animation, like I said, is just making it move.
Do you have a question, Scuba?
I was going to say, did you find that like taking Niko, going like starting with an interactive comic production and like doing all of that before going into actually like a full animated TV series, like did you find a lot of those assets and like that revision and iterating process happened on the comic stage, so that when it came to the show you were like, yeah, like this is what, like, we got the thing, like, did it like set you up better than if you just like went straight to a production studio with like an idea for a show and kind of started from scratch from there?
Yeah, no, definitely. I guess in a way we'd already done the development process, right? Like, usually if you just pitched like a PDF, like an idea to a studio, and it got greenlit, they would then do 3-month development stage where the art department would figure out, you know, the visual style, the character personality, like they would do little animation tests and that kind of thing. So essentially our animated comic served as the prototype, if you like, for the series. So yeah, it helped hugely. Obviously you don't always have the opportunity to do that, and sometimes you have to just create it like as part of the production. But the fact that we could give the animated comic to every single one of the team in the LA studio that was animating it, it was kind of like, you know, here's your blueprint, just recreate this, basically.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, that is awesome. It's kind of interesting as well, because I've heard, you know, a lot of animators talk about how it's places like Adult Swim now are looking at YouTube shorts of animators, because they're able to see a completed short of what they're going to get. For example, Haha You Clowns is a show on Adult Swim, but it was a long time short on YouTube, and I think it was one of the executives saying that like it's such an amazing thing for them now that they can completely see what they're getting as well, which is really interesting, which obviously harkens back to what you were doing 10 plus years ago, you know. We do have some more questions. We have a double question from Silo. Firstly, any tips for not getting overwhelmed with world building?
Yeah. So how did you guys set on prehistoric vibes of the world? Were there previous iterations? I think you've got to enjoy the world building stage, you know, and you got to play to your strengths. Like I say, like the world building for us came from probably a few questions. One was, how do we create something unique? And it was, the answer to that was playing to Jim's strength, which was designing these like prehistoric beasts that were like amalgamations of different creatures merged together. And it felt like the only place where they would be fully believable would be in a prehistoric setting, right? Like if you had one of those creatures in a New York City, it's just going to look ridiculous, and you'd have to create a whole ridiculous plot to make that plausible. So the world building grows out of asking those questions. Where do you want to take the audience? What setting would serve this story and tell this story in the best way possible? That's actually a strong tip for story writing, that whatever story you want to tell, you then pick a setting which will enhance the story. So for example, The Matrix wouldn't necessarily have worked if it was set in Game of Thrones times, because it was about, you know, AI kind of taking over the world. So therefore it had to be set in a modern, slightly futuristic setting. So you're basically, your backdrop, your world is always supporting your key story.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's like you say, it has to be something you're interested in. If I'm not particularly interested in drawing, you know, dinosaur-like beasts in a prehistoric setting, it's I'm not gonna commit or be give it that extra, you know, as opposed to like people, you know, it's write what you know, create what you want to see.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think that because we don't want to hold you too long, but we could pick your brains all day. I would love to know if that generic question, if you were doing it all over again right now, and obviously I'm sure you're, working on other stuff right now, but if you were doing Niko and the Sword of Light all over again, is there anything you would do differently if you were doing it right now? What would change?
Yeah, there is something that I would do differently, actually. So basically, when we started working on the actual production after we raised the Kickstarter, we all kind of set like a bar. Okay, this is the quality we want, and obviously, but that was very time consuming to do. But we felt like that was important. But what happened was all the interactivity that we had planned for the iPad, where, for example, you clicked the panel and fed the flies to the toad, or you could press certain parts of the panels and you'd see a little insect pop out and stuff, or when that scene of the fish, you could press each one of the fish and each one of them would give you like a personal warning. So the idea is that the viewer was sort of taking part in the story. It wasn't like you weren't controlling it, but you were there taking part. And we kind of felt like that's not that important, as things got tight and we had to start making decisions on what we were going to cut. The interactivity got cut, and we favored the quality of the production instead. And in the back of my mind, I was always like, it would have been really cool because the iPad was interactive and the screen, you could actually touch it. It felt like we should have taken advantage of that. But anyway, that was how it ended up. And then obviously the project came out, and I sent it to all my friends and family, and everyone like watched, loved it and stuff. And then I spoke to one of my my good friends who had 2 boys, and I said, how was it? Like, did your boys enjoy it? And he's like, yeah, we read it when we went to when they were going to bed last night. But he said, I showed it to them, they read it through and finished, and then that was it. They never asked to see it again. Like, he was, being positively constructive about like the feedback. And I realized what the problem was, is that kids don't really care that much about like, is all the rim lighting cool and is there all the depth? They would have actually loved it if it was interactive and they could have sat there and pressed things and joined in with the story. So I actually think the app would have been more successful if it had more interactivity in it, and we'd tip that balance a little bit more. Those have been something that parents would have talked about. Oh yeah, my kid loved this because he was able to press the dinosaur and make the fish talk and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's in hindsight, it makes sense, but it's something sometimes that you're not sure like what's important. So yeah, I would love to go back and do another pass on it and add all that back in.
And it's like you say, hindsight. It's the knowledge that you only gain that through actually doing it the way you did it the first time, and it's but it needs to be done that way in order to gain that knowledge. I know we're running a bit late, and we don't want to hold you up too long, because I know you're a new father and you're probably a million things to do. But I do have one more question, and I can kind of tie it into my final one before we let you go, and you can tell everyone what you're up to and where they can find you. But I was going to ask, just, what general advice would you give to young animators, young creators? You've obviously given out a load of different nuggets of information, but Vojo has asked about storytelling. And do you start with a general idea, then brainstorm, then iron out the details, or does the story develop as you work?
Yeah, it's different every time, right? Like, and also I've in the past often worked by myself, and I actually personally think that's the worst way to work. I think the more people you involve, the more you are shaping a story with other people, but you're also accountable, because it's amazing how one person you can get sidetracked and you can go off on a tunnel and not see that you've got obsessed about something, and then it only takes one of your buddies, your animator friends, to come in and be like, yeah, that's cool, but actually, like, you're obsessing over this, and actually, the story can be much simpler than that. And so once you start creating story with 1 or 2 or 3 other people, it bounces around everyone, and it never goes too far in one direction, because the other people will pull it back. Whereas in the past, I've worked on singular projects, and when I look back at them, they're my least favorite things I've done, because they just didn't it's hard to explain. They just didn't have an all-rounded kind of finish. Whereas Niko was the creation of 4 people, and each one of us had a different viewpoint. Bobby was business, I was story, Jim was art, and Kay was like painting, you know, concept. And somehow the 4 of us created this world that felt like it had a good balance. So I think, yeah, first of all, find someone who you either you can work with, or at least bounce your story off, pitch it to them, talk to them about it. It could be your mom, it could be someone down the park, but it's amazing when you tell a story, you just immediately get feedback. You're like, that's not as good as I thought it was. I need to work on that.
That's even
Yeah,
like Underpants, the main characters. It's you have one of the kids is the writer for all their comics and stories. The kids drawing them, and you have scenes where you're passing pages off between each other.
Yeah, 100%. And you know what? I tell you this 100%. The funnest part of working on Niko by far was sitting around the table having those story meetings. Like, it wasn't, because everything else is a grind, right? Like sitting hours and hours and hours of neck ache and drawing thousands and thousands of frames. The end result is there, and I'm really proud of it. But by far the funnest part of that process, and for me, why I do what I do, is actually like this, sitting around chatting with, you know, a bunch of like-minded dudes and just talking story. Like, that is what it's about for me.
Yeah, it's funny because you make a great point, because as someone who I, you know, for a lot of time, like, resist collaborating and, you know, want to do everything myself. But when you look at some of the great partnerships, like even Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant created amazing work together. But when they separate, the stuff they do solo, it's like, you didn't have anyone to bounce that off. You didn't have your sparring partner, and it shows.
That's
it.
That's it.
And I think you see that throughout history of all great creative partnerships. When they're apart, the work just never reaches the level when you have 2 great minds, or 3, 4, 5 coming together. And it makes sense then when you look at The Simpsons, and then you realize that, okay, maybe 2 people are getting writing credits on the show, but that actual episode had like 50 different writers. You know, it's definitely something.
Yeah, like, I do think it's, you know, some people are good at working on their own, and they just have this ability. Like, I can't think of anyone on top of my head apart from you, Trev, but like, you know, people who are just able to just create these worlds, like comic artists. You know, there's some independent comic artists that are just Mike Mignola, right? Like, he made Hellboy pretty much by himself, and then maybe involved writers and stuff down the line. But there is people that are good at it. But I think most people would benefit from bouncing ideas off others.
Yeah, I don't think anything can be not improved with another like-minded creative coming on board. Scuba, before we wrap it up and let Adam get back to his life, do you have any questions?
Less a question, more just like a statement. It's like seeing the thumbnails and like the steps of production was awesome, and now my brain's just kind of like buzzing with this like interactive iPad medium. I feel like it's just like entirely underutilized for digital artists. So I'm like, I gotta get some ideas down.
I agree. Like, it never really took off. And if you type in now interactive comic or like animated comic on YouTube, you get like 2 results. I'm like, why is no one doing this? I mean, it is expensive, especially if you do hand drawn. But man, yeah, I think there's a whole industry waiting to be tapped into.
Yeah, I'm gonna go watch those 2 videos.
Yeah, I think just like the level of production in Niko and a sort of like for an interactive comic is just off the charts. Like you said, it is like feature TV. It's better. Yeah, it's better than a lot of TV animation. It's better than a lot of animation I see right now that's being produced. It almost feels like a lot of TV animation is regressing almost as all these shortcuts come into it.
Yeah.
But we could talk about that all day, but it's been fantastic to talk to Adam. It's been really inspiring. Similar to Scuba, I'm inspired now just to get back to any of the projects that I was kind of feeling about. Just having that display and that presentation now has just gassed me up to go and animate and the storyboard and to draw. And I think that's the best thing you can do for other creatives as well, just to kind of have that energy boost to them. It's been incredible getting to see it firsthand and explained. And for the people that checked it out, we have over 300 viewers in the live stream. You don't get anything like that every day. You got to experience firsthand from one of the project's creators, just take you step by step in incredible detail throughout the process. And I know you've learned something. And we have this live stream recorded, so we'll have it available on we'll repost on our Twitter, on the YouTube channel, so it's safe for posterity. But it's just been Adam, it's been a pleasure. We both said we were really looking forward to looking at the pipeline of the production, but it's just completely exceeded our expectations. So I want to thank you for that.
No, you're welcome. Thanks so much for having me on and for organizing this thing, because bringing everyone together like this, that really inspires me as well. So I'm glad I got to inspire you guys.
Thank you so much, Adam. That was great. For the people in the crowd, the actual Soul Animation art exhibit, it's up on Mallow. Make sure you go check it out. Click the likes on the things that you like in there, because whoever has the most likes at the end of the week gets a bunch of money, and that's fun.
Yeah, we have 5,000 USD to give away to a lot of animators, so make sure that you're clicking on your favorites and show the animators some love. And we'll be back tomorrow. We'll actually have Roach, your good friend, is going to join us tomorrow, and he's going to break down storytelling. So anyone that was asked questions around building a story or a narrative, make sure you swing by, and we'll dig deep with Roach about narrative and compelling stories, and we'll go even further as well in that aspect. So hopefully you can take something from this video and this workshop with Adam, and then compound on that with Roach's space as well. Other than that, go support the artists, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, guys.
We have